producing incredible amount of pipeline with their podcast because they're meeting with their ideal buyers, having conversations with them like we are now. And then buyers are like, oh, what do you do? Oh, that's actually really interesting, right? You're getting conversations with people who wouldn't give you 5 minutes before, and now are building relationships with them.
Everything leads to growth with the National Association for Sales Professionals. The Leads to Growth podcast with the National Association for Sales Professionals provides in-depth discussions sharing the best sales, prospecting, influence, and communication skills, as well as sales training techniques to take your professional sales career to the next level.
All right, we're back with another Leads to Growth podcast. My name is Chris McCoy with the National Association of Sales Professionals. Oh, I always get that wrong. And I am here with, honestly, I'm kind of a super fan of this guy and his team over at Sweetfish. But I'm here with Dan Sanchez, also known as Dan Chez. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. Thanks for calling me Dan Chez.
Hey, I heard his friends do that, so I figured I'd get on the inside. That's why I got the V-neck in too. I'll tell you more about that later. But listen, we are excited to have Dan with us today, y'all. As you know, podcasting has been something that I've been passionate about, and I really love the conversations that we get to have, the insider shares that I get to give y'all as my audience. And we've just been having a lot of fun with this. And so one of the groups that I started to follow very early on was this group, Sweetfish Media. The name enough is cool, right? And so Dan's partner I think we had James on before, but we'll talk with him in the future. But Dan has a great story on how he got into podcasting, and I think he's been a lot like a lot of us out there, where he maybe didn't see the ray of sunshine from the podcasting that maybe everybody does. And I don't know about y'all, but I was like, podcasting's been around forever, anyways, right? But listen, we got a fresh new take on it, and we got some great stuff. Dan is the co-host of the B2B Growth Podcast. This thing's a monster. It's 160 plus monthly downloads, over 1,600 episodes. It's one of the top daily podcasts out there for B2B marketers. They've got 100 plus shows in Sweetfish Media. So they run a media company that actually supports people to build and put out their podcasts. You don't understand how much time it takes to put all these pieces together and to really maximize it, because you can record a show and put it out there and you can have some people on, but this is far bigger than that. And Dan's going to tell us a little bit about that. But to know the good things about Dan, he loves Yerba Mate. Don't know what that is. I'm going to have to ask you about that. Loves Christmas. I've probably seen Home Alone a million times, so I'm there with you. The great outdoors. I got hiking trips last month, and next I'm going to Sequoia soon. V-necks, Disney. So that's why I got this guy on. I was like, we should be friends. I'm going to have him on. Dan, thank you so much for being here, brother.
Absolutely. And to kick it off, I actually have some yerba mate with me. It's a South American loose leaf tea. It replaced my coffee addiction a long time ago. It is caffeinated. People say it's a more healthy version of caffeine. I don't buy it, but I certainly feel a lot better drinking this every single morning.
And you must
it's kind of one of those unique things that just kind of if you know what it is, you know what it is. If not, you're like, what is that?
Y'all, it must be an insider group here.
Got this little straw. It almost looks slightly illegal, but I promise it's all good.
Open carry permit. I think you only drink those in New Orleans. So Dan, I got to tell you that, I've been following you on LinkedIn. Dan's LinkedIn is a gold mine. Follow Dan Sanchez on LinkedIn. It's unreal. Sweetfish Media. Check out their podcast. But he put this post out recently, and the post said there are 2 million live podcasts. Think that's saturated? There are also 600 million blogs, 37 million YouTube channels, 740 million LinkedIn users, and so on and so forth. This is a new market. Dan, you were once on the side of, I'm not sure podcasts are here. How did you stumble into something that you are so good at with such a great team and really pop this can of worms open with podcasting?
Yep. If there's one thing you got to know about me, it's that I love marketing. It's like what I do for work, but it's also my hobby. It's what I do in the evenings. I wake up early in the mornings to watch lynda.com courses. I don't know what it is. I'm just kind of addicted to it. I love it. So I've been into marketing for probably 12, 13 years now, working my way up from like entry level and working at a bunch of different types of organizations. A couple of years ago, I was working in higher ed, actually, a nonprofit, a higher education institution. I was the marketing director or head of marketing, advancing the school, and I was doing all the digital marketing stuff. I actually considered myself a digital marketer. I started as a team of 1, grew it into a team of 25. It was fantastic. Wow. And we did everything. We had the craziest fun email nurture sequences. We were killing it with Facebook and Google ads, SEO, like getting hundreds of thousands of page views a month type of stuff. And it's in just raw SEO, search engine rankings. For all the right keywords. Like I had a great team. We were killing it, had a media department. But I was not doing podcasting. I was like, podcasting, like I'm into YouTube. Yeah, YouTube. And I still want to figure out YouTube someday. I've not cracked the code on that one yet. But I always thought podcasting was kind of rough because it just doesn't have good discoverability. It's hard to get found as a podcast. So I just kind of always pushed it off as a channel that was fun. I actually consumed a lot of podcasts, which should have told me something. If I was consuming that much podcasts and actually probably way more minutes a month in podcasts than blogs, probably not YouTube. I'm a big YouTube consumer, but I was consuming a lot of minutes of it. And at the time I was like, it's just not that really influential. And then came along James Carberry. He was invited to speak at a TEDx event that I was speaking at as well. And we met each other and kind of sized each other up. We're like, man, we really just kind of liked each other. Like we both kind of figured out we really liked marketing and we're both into it. And I was really into search engine optimization at the time, getting great results. And I started telling James, like, dude, like, why aren't you turning your podcast into SEO ranking blog posts? Like, the method I'm using to get SEO ranking content by interviewing subject matter experts in a way that gives me the content I need to create like #1 rank worthy blog posts is almost the same as what you're doing with B2B growth and just interviewing people. You should be getting double dipping that. And he got excited about it. So that turned to lots of conversations, which turned to freelance, which turned to it turned to consulting, turned to freelance, turned to a part-time job, me working for Sweetfish. And then I was working for Sweetfish full-time. In exchange for all that work, he helped me launch my podcast. And I don't know, it like started changing things for me. Even launching my own personal brand. I started a podcast first around the nonprofit space because that's kind of where I was. And I noticed something happened. I was already ranking for a lot of nonprofit keywords. I had a lot of nonprofit marketing just going for my personal brand. But when I started interviewing subject matter experts on nonprofit marketing, something happened. My personal brand started to get noticed. I started getting invitations to speak places. People would get off the podcast with me. I'm just sitting there asking questions and they get off the podcast with me and be like, wow, like you really are good at this nonprofit marketing thing, because they had checked out my website. They saw the little TEDx talk I had given, but like they were checking me out. And I'm like sitting there. I'm like, are they kidding? I literally just spent an hour asking them questions and they think I'm the expert. Like I've done some stuff, but I literally had them on because they were the expert. They're just like, wow, man, you're pretty good. We should talk more. I'm like, something happened. Like the perception changed in a way that nothing else I had ever done, not the TEDx talk, not the blogs that ranked, the articles I'd put out there, some of the social media work I'd done, nothing had quite pushed it forward as much as podcast had. Wow. So when James was telling me about this, and James, right about the same time, James published his book, Content-Based Networking. If you haven't read this book, I swear I probably read over 100 books, business books last year. It was definitely by far the best business book I'd read last year. I mean, clearly I went and joined the company. Pretty much the same, like not long afterwards, quit my job at the university and started working for James full time because I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was like, I have to be an evangelist for this. This is the new thing. I am now all into this. And now working with Sweetfish and being able to work with our customers on it, I've really understood where podcasting sits. And I misunderstood how powerful podcasting can be. Is it's not it's not just like getting found and getting listeners as a podcast, and that's good. I'm a director of audience growth. That's like what I help people do. So getting an audience in there is very influential. Chris Walker and David Gearhart keep bragging about how awesome podcasts are, and they're right, because it is very influential. But what's even more influential than the audience you can build with it is the relationships with the guests you have on the show. Like right now, I'm talking with Chris, and we've interacted on LinkedIn quite a few times. But now, like, the relationship with Chris and I right now is going to a different level because we're sitting here on Zoom face to face, actually having a real conversation. And now, the next time we interact on LinkedIn, it's just going to be at a different place. Like, I'm going to be noticing his content more. He'll probably be noticing my content more. And now that relationship has taken a huge step forward that would have taken forever just in comments on social media. But that same thing can happen with your buyers, with maybe people you'd like to build strategic partnerships with. Shoot, maybe with some potential dream employees you'd like to bring onto your team, right? I mean, James did it with me. It worked really well.
I absolutely love that, Dan. And I want to just point out a couple of things that are just very apparent to me at the moment. One, you always kind of figure listen, everybody goes to the audience first. It's short-sighted, right? We don't understand the value of the guests, because when you've not done a podcast, you're like, well, how am I supposed to get these guests? You don't understand the psychology that goes into inviting. So a prospect that maybe I'd like to talk to, a chief sales officer of a big company, and I'd like to have a conversation with them about selling sales training, right? Approaching that person in a social media or any other place is it's a dance. There's a time you have to double down on rapport. You have to build relationships. You have to align. You have to do all these different things. Well, once you invite a person as a guest on your podcast, first off, you prop them up because you're giving them the significance. First thing you do, you have them on the call, you tell all the great things about them. They get to hear all the great things about them that they just told you probably, right? And then you get an opportunity to hear them tell their story in an authentic, beautiful way. And you get to listen. For one of the first times in your life, in your days, you sit and listen. Most of us don't take the time to listen to people on a daily basis. We just wait for them to get done talking. But on a podcast, you truly enter into a different communication place, because I have to be responsive. I have to be with Dan. And so I'm invested in his story and in what he's sharing with us. So this has made such a significant impact on me. And it's the psychology that goes into this piece that is so strong. And it's something that most people never see until they've actually got involved and done a podcast for a little bit, or unless they follow Sweetfish Media and Dan Sanchez. But so Dan, all right. So tell me this. So tell me about who do you target as your guests, and how does that go? And because there's some strategy behind that, right? When you're starting a podcast, you're like, all right, who are the guests that I'm going to have, and what am I going to talk about? Like, because most people don't like, well, I could just have people in my industry. They don't understand the finite details of the value of specific guests.
So we take a pretty systematic approach because we have a large show. We're doing it daily. It's a daily show. And we actually just mixed it up recently. So we're probably doing this about half the time with our show. Half the time we're now doing what we call deep dives, where we're spending a whole month focused on a very specific topic. And then the other months are just kind of like anything goes. Like, it could be an episode about anything. It could be solo, it could be a guest. And we're also, with those, we're using it systematically to build relationships with our ideal buyers. Now, I actually, even this morning, I went and I'm reaching out to a bunch of people we try to reach out to people, specifically tech companies, though generally any B2B company works pretty well. I just find that tech companies are particularly a little bit more interested in podcasts because they're reading and consuming the same stuff we are, right, on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
So I'm reaching out to them. I connect with them on LinkedIn. I interact with their content. I try to get to know them as best I can. So I'm reaching out with them being like, hey, I saw this thing you did or something your company did. Would love to hear about it on our podcast. And it's genuine. It's sincere. It's something that I thought was cool that they did or their company did. And I want to hear about it. It's not like I'm specifically looking at their company, trying to find a reason to talk to them, but I'm finding something that's unique. And then we have them on the podcast, talk about how they're killing it in their job. And honestly, I'm trying really hard. I don't want to just use the podcast as a tool to sell, because then it becomes a little bit of a bait and switch, right? And I don't want to do that. I really want to build relationships. I really want to add value. At best, if I want it to connect a little bit more to building pipeline sooner rather than later, because honestly, sometimes even if I don't sell anything or say nothing about Sweetfish, oftentimes like they're smart. They visit our website, they see what we're up to. Like it's in my head, it's in my LinkedIn profile. We produce podcasts for B2B brands. It is obvious. And a lot of them will just be like, hey, so you do podcasting. Tell me more about that. It just turns into
the law of reciprocity.
But if I want to be a little bit more proactive, we also use our podcast for original research. Just posted about it this morning, some of the insights I've gotten from it, of which I ask them 10 questions at post interview. So I stop recording, then I record it again, ask them 10 questions of what we'd like to learn. It's valuable for us just in content, but even valuable for me as a marketer. Now I understand what my ideal buyers like are thinking on whatever I'd like to know, really. So it's another way to get good content out of a podcast. Because hardly does anybody ever want to show up for a Q&A or research, right? But they will for a podcast, and you can bake the research questions in there.
It's
but I will often sneak a question in that like kind of gives me an idea if they're even in if they have buying intent around podcasting or content services of some kind. If they don't, then I put them on a maybe future customer track where I ask them for collaborations later, maybe have them go into a guest post on a blog post or a roundup post where I ask them and a lot of other people to give me contributions to that. And just keep them in the loop, and just continue to build a relationship with them. No strings attached. If I feel like they're in the market, then a couple weeks after the podcast goes live, I might shoot them like a video saying, hey, like I noticed you said this after the interview. I thought I might be able to help with that. And honestly, just offer them more advice and kind of lead into some consultative selling, but like really value driven selling. If they're interested, I just kind of shoot it off like, hey, do you want to talk more about this way that we like that this information might be able to help? Because I've run into that before, and this is something we found that works. If they're in the market, they'll set up the meeting. If they're not in the market, be like, hey, thanks, but we haven't figured out. No problem. Right.
Your consultative sales. You are selling in a value leads money follows way. Look, I'm gonna be a resource for you. I'm gonna give value until you don't need it, don't want it, or want more. Yep. Right? And if you want more, great. There's a business we have out of that, But you lead so strong with value. He's out there building relationships every day with the podcast, growing a network that is so vast, and they're all loaded. Why? Because he's given every single person that he's worked with, even if they never do anything with him, he still have a little reciprocity built in. Why? Because he offered them, he had them as a guest on the podcast. He gave them material. He made them feel good, right? This is always happening, and relationships are and I bet you're going to get a lot of great referrals from this too, don't you, Dan?
Tons. I mean, people come inbound, they're like, come into my DMs, they're like, hey, like you've been posting about this. I was listening to the podcast. Like, tell me more.
Yeah.
And so I actually take the first sales call. I actually love taking the first sales call. I mean, I kind of should because they're coming to me. So I should take the first call, but it's a pretty smooth sales transition when, they've been listening to you for a while on your podcast. They come in, you're the expert. You've been in their ear for months, maybe. And now they're like, wow, I get to meet with Dan Sanchez, right? And you're like, hey, how can I help? And they're like, oh,
absolutely. I read this. How much exactly? I read this, one of Seth Godin's books, I believe. And he talks about, marketing's for liars or something. All marketers are liars, I think was the book. But he says, the call talks about the line of authority. And when you come in above the line of authority, when someone's introduced to you above the line of authority, now they have to pull you down. They have to disprove you. Something has to happen in order for their belief about you to change, right? But if you come in below, they've got to have something about you that's going to change and bring you up above that line of authority. As a podcast host, asking smart questions, having conversations with my peers, you are above the line of authority right off the bat, which gives you even like you heard Dan, even if you don't know all the data, you don't know all the information, you're already there because of the psychology of the introduction. Dan, one more thing I wanted to ask you. One more thing. I had a whole bunch of questions. But I hear you talking about the content. It was the thing that brought you and James together. I think most people think that they record a podcast and then they just put the audio up on the Spotify and the Apple, and then the job's done, and they just wait for their next podcast. Tell me about what happens once the podcast is recorded.
If you only publish a podcast to the apps, then you're wasting so much effort, so much time, because chances are, I bet you're blogging too. Are you blogging? Are you doing
Mhm.
social media? Oh, you are. Oh, it's frustrating, huh? How much time that takes. Well, you could just be cutting down all that time with just taking your awesome podcast episode you've already spent so much time on and just splintering out. Like, hand a podcast over to your blogger and say like, hey, make a blog post out of this. Trust me, they will write a better blog post faster based on that content than they were probably going to come up with scratch, because it's literally taking the words out of your ideal buyer's mouth and putting it into a blog post form. Not only does it endear you better to that buyer, because you're like, oh, we didn't just turn your episode into a podcast episode, we turned it into a blog post and tons of social media content. Now your face is everywhere. So it's serving them better and getting their message out there, but it's also building content that other ideal buyers are going to want to read, because it's content that your ideal buyers are making. You're not creating content for them, you're creating content with them. And you could turn
Love
that
that.
into a blog post, multiple social media pieces, YouTube video, we loved the little micro videos on LinkedIn. We do a
Mhm.
bunch of those. That can all come from one podcast episode. So it's almost like making marketing for your marketing. One podcast episode can turn in 5 to 10 pieces of content if you wanted to. We all know
Love
Chris
it.
Walker's been doing it pretty effectively. Like, all his little videos come from a webinar, but I think they're coming from his podcast as well.
That's great. For everybody out there going, wait a second, the Leads to Growth podcast isn't, don't worry, we're making some changes. It's coming. All right. Dan, one more question for you too about that. So weekly, daily, obviously monthly is not enough. What's I mean, is it just as much as you can because it's valuable content?
It depends on the kind of show you want to make. I'd say weekly at a minimum.
Weekly at a minimum.
I'm always struggling with customers who are like, can we go every other week? We just don't have enough time. I'm like, don't have enough time. Like, you don't have enough time to talk to your prospects? Like, what are you talking
Right.
about? I'd be talking to my prospects all day. It's just slowing down the pipeline anyway, but I get it. There's other initiatives they're doing and stuff, but at least weekly. Weekly is kind of the minimum cadence. And I would say multiple times a week would be ideal. If you're brave enough to go daily, it certainly makes an impact. And that's something I, and certainly James and most of our Sweetfish employees know, is that volume makes a huge difference. I'm amazed at how many people are like, quality, yet they don't produce much. They're so strung up on quality, they produce a blog post every other month. I'm like, well, as good as that blog post was, one, it wasn't that good. Like, did it go viral?
Right.
No. Like, honestly, you usually get to quality just by producing a ton of quantity and then learning just from what people actually react to on LinkedIn or on the podcast episodes, what resonates with people. Oftentimes I'm posting to LinkedIn most days, and I'm always surprised like what actually goes viral, and people are like, this is amazing, and what is just like, I'm like, this is the best post ever. No, only a few hundred views on that one. People didn't like it. It wasn't the best post. I thought that was the quality. It's like, quality is up for interpretation. And what you think
Absolutely.
quality might not be what they think is quality. So doing more does help. It leads to better quality faster and gives you more, like Gary Vee says, it gets you more at bats where you're able to hit
Mm,
more home runs because you're taking more swings.
absolutely.
So I'd say
Absolutely.
the more the better.
More
We've
the
definitely
better.
published 3 to 4 episodes a day on this podcast. Not every day, but like, we've definitely published that many in a day before.
3 to 4 in a day.
In a day. Yeah.
Woo! That's
So
content,
that's
yo.
kind of a lot. And then it becomes a problem of like, okay, like, we're overwhelming people, but honestly, people get used to that with our show, where it's kind of like they just kind of pick and choose which episodes they want to listen to, since we're
Sure.
publishing at least every day. So that's just kind of the show we have. We have a daily show. People are
Yeah, I
not
think
every episode.
It's natural, exactly. I think I did hear you call him Sweet James.
Sweet James or Sweet
Sweet.
Fish James?
I
That's
just
a
wanted
good
to
name
point
for him,
out
though. I think we're gonna start
Sweet
calling him
James.
that.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, that might be an
Sweet
insider
James.
nickname.
Sounds like he's from the South, which
Yeah,
is from
right.
Florida, so I'm like, yeah, it's not too far off.
Not too far off, no, for sure. So, question for you, Dan. Tell me some success stories, maybe some people that were really able to open up their marketing, even if you don't have to give numbers or ROI or anything like that, but just how someone was like, yeah, we're going to start, we're going to give it a run, and from after working with y'all, getting them going, just the relationships and business development conversations that they were able to start pulling from that, or how fast they grew their podcast and what returned on that.
Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to think of one customer. It's like a testimonial video on our homepage. I don't remember the business, and I'm struggling. I will link a video to it. I'll send it to you. And you can put it in the
Awesome.
show notes.
Great.
But a lot of our
I just popped
customers,
that
and
one
this
up.
one in particular, just are producing incredible amount of pipeline with their podcast because they're meeting with their ideal buyers, having conversations with them like we are now, and then buyers are like, "Oh, what do you do? Oh, that's actually really interesting, right?" You're getting conversations with people who wouldn't give you 5 minutes before, and now are
That's
building relationships with them. Ethan
that's
Butte with
exactly
Bomb
it.
Bomb uses his podcast for a number of different things, but to build relationships with lots of ideal customers, of which he throws over to the sales team regularly, um, and uses it just to advance their brand. It's been huge for them in launching their new positioning because they actually have a channel. They have him as an
Oh, you
evangelist
work
getting it
with
out
Bomb
there.
Bomb? Is that what you said?
Yeah, Bomb Bomb. They make
Yeah, I love
personal
them.
videos.
Yeah, no,
So they're
I had one of their
and
people on. We did a
Ethan's
webinar
one
with
of
them
my
the other
favorite
day.
people that I get to talk to on LinkedIn. He's fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, I heard great things about them and their group. I actually got a demo with them coming up tomorrow, I think. Their little platform over there. They're having a lot of fun. They're doing a lot of cool content too. So that makes sense that they're working with someone like y'all. So all right, I love this. So let's say I'm new to the podcast industry. All right, I'm like, all right, well, listen, there seems to be a saturated market out there. Like, tell me about I mean, look, you said YouTuber. I'd love to get on YouTube and really make a splash. YouTube is ginormous. It is the ocean of content right now, right? Um, Give me perspective on where podcasts are right now with what else is going on out there in the world.
There's so many different ways to win, honestly. But I find that with B2B specifically, I can't think of a better like channel combination of like podcasting and LinkedIn together. Podcasting still doesn't have quite the discoverability I'd like it to have, but when you pair it with LinkedIn, it's your gold. LinkedIn's really good as a short form content channel, and podcasting is fantastic as a long form content channel. I know just as somebody who's done content for every platform, I've like vlogged and made videos with like actually this camera right here. I've literally run around Casey Neistat style and edited videos myself. I've made podcasts. I've written long form blog posts. I've done Twitter. I've done LinkedIn. Podcast is the easiest content platform to produce content for because it's easy to come up with questions and have somebody else give the content, or just outline something that you're already an expert in and just hashing it out on a solo episode, and then maybe light editing and publishing. It's just easier to make. And then when you pair that with LinkedIn, where there's lots of ways to get discovered there. And I made a whole little video course on how to build up your LinkedIn profile. It works remarkably well. I'm still really bullish on things like search engine marketing. I think SEO has a huge platform. I like that you can put in a lot of work into SEO and just kind of like lay off it a little bit and it continues to work for you. That's great. I think YouTube has a ton of potential for B2B in the future. As Generation Z, who consumes a lot of YouTube content and not just consumes, but like subscribes to channels and like follows things, as they grow up and enter the workforce, they are going to be getting most of their learnings from YouTube. But that's not true yet. Like B2B marketing does hardly ever take off on YouTube yet. So that has yet to come, but I'm pretty bullish. I'm like, in the future, that's going to be something we'll be pushing into, but mixed in with podcasting. Right now, podcasting is huge, and I don't see podcasting going anywhere for at least 10 years. I still think podcasting is super early. I mean, let's even just look at Spotify and Amazon, who have both like put together have probably spent $1 billion acquiring like companies around podcasting. And like I said on that post you mentioned, like they didn't spend $1 billion for where the market is now. They invested $1 billion because they're looking at the trajectory of where this market's going. 40% of people listen to podcasts. There's a whole nother like 40, probably another 40% to like get in over the next 5 to 10 years.
I read these great stats here. There's over 100 million Americans listen to at least one podcast, and almost 70 million listen to a podcast weekly already.
It's only going up.
It's only going up.
COVID's only helped accelerate like digital media, and podcasting is a big one.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying too about quality or quantity versus quality, right? Like even talking about you doing something out of the studio, doing different video. It's video content. It's audio and video content together. It's not just podcast. You don't have to have a studio. You don't have to have the green screen. If you don't, you can put the content out. And then the idea that it's not just one stream, that it is the repurposability of the content that allows it to be valuable in all these other places that you're already playing. It's almost like it's like a bonus layer, right? Like it's like the frosting on top of all the media that you're doing, because all the business development and marketing that you're doing, because it creates an influencer, it opens up doors and conversations, it distributes additional content to your other platforms. It is really like it's almost like an addition to everything that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
The real cake is the relationship you get with the guest. The frosting is the content marketing you get on it. And then the sprinkles is really like how you end up being positioned as a thought leader in the space, even though you were the one asking the questions.
Oh,
you sprinkle in a few like good solo episodes that show your point of view on a certain situation. And I'm like, people will start to see you as a leader in this space. And maybe you don't like the word thought leader. So let's
I love the word thought leader, man. It's a great word. You're right. Because why? Because they're seeing, and just think about the psychology. They're seeing you with their peers. They're seeing you with people up here every day on these calls. I'm right next to Dan Chez over here, y'all. Now I'm pulling myself up on the podcaster host community here just because of who you see me with. Right. There's the old story. You are the people you spend your the 5 people you spend your most time with. Right. Well, when people see you with the people that they want to study and learn from all the time, you become one of the people they want to study and learn from. Just don't screw it up.
We call it the Oprah effect. The Oprah effect. Everybody loves Oprah. That's because she brings all the best people in the world around to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely.
She just asks good questions.
Yeah. And she finds those win-win-win too, right? She's not doing it for a cheap thrill. She's really doing it to build relationships, to make her audience better and learn, which is what I love about the way you guys bring it to the table. It's value, build relationships, build rapport, and trust that just is what the first step of doing business with somebody is. Everybody wants to do business with people. Man, even on LinkedIn, it's ridiculous how many times I'll get harassed with people without not even a slight attempt at rapport, not even fishing for rapport, just throwing things at me, just throwing nets. It's so, and once that happens you shut that company off, you shut that person off instantly. Right? You're almost not looking, you have a perception of them that enters below that line of authority. That's why I really love what you're doing. And I really want all the audience members out there to go, because some of y'all are out there going, oh yeah, but I don't know. I'm not really a thought leader, or I'm not a peer in my industry. I'm not a top person. Listen, this is how you get there. This is how you learn. This is how you grow, by spending time, by asking questions, by building relationships. And eventually you can be there. This is a beautiful place to start, and start now. Like Dan said, don't worry about the perfect situation. Don't make sure you got a studio. Just go start producing good quality, valuable content with your target market, with the people that you want to build relationships with and do business with. And if you don't want to do it yourself, because it's a lot of work to get the value out of it. I'll tell you that. It is a lot of work to get the value out of it. And you can definitely learn from somebody who's done it. I've tried it on my own. You learn, right? You grow. But there are some tools, some tricks, some tips that you can get from people like Sweetfish and Dan that will really allow you to take this thing to the next level and really truly see the value out of the podcast and not just the audience growth, which Dan will help you with. I keep pointing that way, which Dan's going to help you with it anyway. So Dan, listen, where can people follow you? Where can they find more information about you? Because you're all over the place and you're gold mine. So I want to give that to them for sure.
The place I'm most active on is LinkedIn for sure. So it's linkedin.com/in/digital marketing Dan. I wish I could change that to /Dan Jazz, but it's already taken. I'm so bummed.
Oh man.
Oh well. You can of course learn more about Sweetfish Media at sweetfishmedia.com. Go to the blog. I mean, go and listen. There's where you can find B2B growth. Subscribe to the podcast. You can find the blog where I'll publish lots of articles about podcasting. I've even published articles about like every podcast production company, and I published all their pricing with ours in there, so you can actually like see how much it costs to produce. And if you want to follow me personally, you can go to danielsanchez.com, where I publish things that I'm learning about in thought leadership is a big topic that I've been diving into recently. Even how I built a video studio and how I set up my podcasting room, all that kinds of stuff, since I've been getting more questions about that recently too.
Awesome. And the B2B Growth Podcast, y'all, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow that too. They're giving away gold for all of our B2B people out there. And listen, one of the best things, Dan, I just want you to know, I only invite people on this podcast with me that are people I'd like to hang with. You're a real dude. Really appreciate you. It's great to see good people leading with value in the sales and marketing world. Sales has had a bad name sometimes in the past, but this dude's a salesperson. Y'all heard him. He's a salesperson. He's just doing it the different way. He's doing it with leading with value, and that's what we love here at NASP. So thank you so much for being a real sales pro out there, for sharing your gold with us, and for the future investment that we're gonna work together on something. You're gonna consult. And we're gonna start stepping up the content here on the Leads to Growth podcast, and really excited about that and the gold we're taking from today. So thank you so much for being here, Dan.
Certainly. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. All right, y'all. That's the Leads to Growth podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe. No, you want to subscribe for sure, and you want to leave a review, 5 stars if you loved it, and if you don't, listen again. We'll get there. But thanks so much for being here, y'all. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.